What's up, you guys? Void here, coming back at y'all with another video. This time we're going to be looking over the top 10 cards with Flash in Commander. Now, just to clarify, this does not include cards like Leyline of Anticipation or Vidalcan Orrery, cards that give other cards Flash but do not have Flash themselves. So those cards are obviously excluded. They don't have the keyword, but rather cards that have the keyword Flash listed on them. So let's start it off here with some honorable mentions. First we have Vendilion Click. Just wanted to remind you all that this is pertaining to the multiplayer Commander format, so a card like Vendilion Click isn't necessarily weak in this format, but it isn't necessarily strong either. It does offer that hand manipulation, and whenever you are capable of taking something powerful away from your opponent's hand, it's pretty good. But in a multiplayer format where you need to be worried about multiple different opponents, a card like this is a little bit weaker. And then we have a Dual Caster Mage. Fork abilities are usually pretty fun in Commander. Kind of hard to leave this one off the list for me. Then again, fork abilities are not something that necessarily dominate in this format either. So having fork on a creature, I mean, it's pretty decent, but not fantastic, not going to blow anybody's mind. You could obviously throw it into the Inala Wizard deck and take advantage of the ETB that way. Then we have Samut, Voice of Dissent. Would like to experiment with her a little bit more. Not necessarily any mind-blowing combos yet. Her tap ability is really the best thing about her having Flash, is the fact that you can flash her into play and then just tap. The fact that she has haste makes it kind of pointless just to flash her into play at your opponent's end step so you get to attack the next turn. She already has haste. So really the only reason why I would flash her into play is if you need an extra blocker or if you wanted to take advantage of the tap ability, but so far there isn't really anything outrageously powerful with that. She's a solid commander option though, so I will definitely recommend her as a commander, as well as one of the 99 in a solid Naya creature deck. Really can't go wrong with her. And then we go on to Sirach Dragonclaw, which is yet another creature-centric type of card here with Flash. I actually think he's pretty cool. He gives your other creatures trample. He can't be countered and pretty much makes your other creatures uncounterable as well. This guy was probably the closest out of the honorable mentions to actually make this list. The only reason why he did not was just for the fact that in a creature-based deck like, say, Animar, yes, making your creatures uncounterable is pretty powerful, but you're more or less just playing in a deck where you're entirely just playing creature spells in the first place, so if something gets countered, it's usually not that big of a deal. You likely have something else coming up right after it, so this isn't seeing too much play in something like a combo deck or anything like that where your creature spells getting countered is likely going to ruin your day. So really it's going to be in Animar decks, creature-based decks, and Teamer colors, mainly for the trample static ability to all your creatures. So that's the main reason why I would put it in a deck. The Flash really doesn't seem too special, aside from just surprising your opponents if they happen to throw out a counter spell, but that's about it. And then last honorable mention is Bogarden Hellkite. Absolutely love this dude. He is a ton of mana to just flash there, but he is in red, so likely if you leave up mana, people aren't going to expect you to Cyclonic Rift or do anything crazy like that unless you're also in blue. So that's a huge positive. The only reason why he didn't make the list was because unless you're in a deck that can constantly take advantage of the ETB, you're basically just getting 5 damage divided just once. But there are also some pretty fun tricks that you can do with that. Let's say you have a Gisela Blade, a Gold Knight, anything that can double the amount of damage. Well, that's 5 damage divided, so you can just deal 2 damage to 5 separate targets if you want to, which is also pretty nice. But yeah, you get so many different options with just dealing damage divided. And he's also a pretty cool dragon, so he fits into something like, say, a Kalia deck where you love Dragon Tribal. Pretty solid. Now onto the actual list here. We have number 10, which is Archangel Avacyn, that flips into Avacyn the Purifier. The main reason why I have her on this list over the other honorable mentions here was for the fact that once she enters the battlefield, all of your creatures gain indestructible until end of turn. Sort of a nod to her older Avacyn card where she gave your permanents indestructible. This one just makes your creatures indestructible until end of turn. But since she does have Flash, it means that you can get around board wipes, things that will destroy all your creatures. You can get around combat, basically protect your whole team there for at least one turn. And in addition to that, you get a pretty solid creature. I wouldn't say she's super fantastic, but whenever a non-angel creature you control dies, you get to transform her, and she does deal 3 damage to each creature and each player, so that's also a huge upside. The only real downside I could think of would be the fact that she's Boros colored, technically, because her flip side's red. But other than that, though, a pretty solid ability to have on Flash. The other cards that I mentioned before didn't necessarily do enough. I feel like giving your creatures indestructible until end of turn on a Flash creature with an ETB like that, I mean, that's pretty solid. Number 9, I have Jin-Gitaxias Core Augur, probably one of the biggest and baddest creatures known to have Flash. He is a billion mana to get out there, which is the only downside to him, and might be the only reason why he's this low on the list. But for the fact that he is that expensive, and you do have to leave up mana in order to flash him into play, sort of means that his whole Flash, the whole reason why he would be on this list in the first place, is very unconventional. I mean, you have to leave all that mana up, and usually if you have any islands untapped and people are looking at you, they know you're up to something pretty fishy in the first place, and Cyclonic Rift, something like that, is going to be on their mind. So really, the whole purpose of this card having Flash is to basically force an opponent to discard their whole hand. That's the whole purpose of it. But usually, whenever I've seen people play this, they don't really care too much about the Flash. They'll just cast this as sorcery speed and then draw 7 cards at their end step. So kind of a fail when it comes to having the Flash keyword. But other than that, though, a very strong creature that happens to have the Flash keyword. So it did just barely make this list as well. Then number 8 is Torrential Gearhulk. Has Flash, and when it enters the battlefield, you may cast a target instant in your graveyard, and then whenever it hits the graveyard again, it exiles itself. So pretty good card. There are just a ton of good instants in this format that you could take advantage of, and a huge bonus with this guy compared to something like, say, a Snapcaster Mage is the fact that you don't have to pay that card's converted mana cost, so it's pretty much just free. That is a huge upside with this card. It is also an artifact too, so if you happen to have any synergies with artifacts, this also works out pretty well with that. Overall though, pretty solid card to put into a control deck. Maybe an artifact deck if you're desperate, but not too many instants in those decks. Number 7 is Aven Mindcensor. Kind of dropped off, used to be one of the better creatures you could have with Flash in a white deck, mainly for the fact that there's so many fetch lands. We have Demonic Tutors, Vampiric Tutors are just so dominant in this format. Whenever you can basically just destroy all of those cards' usefulness, I mean, that's a victory in itself. In the fact that you have this all on Flash on a creature, that you can do this in response to said cards, I mean, that's a huge upside. The only downside is the fact that it just seems like a lot of people have forgotten about Aven Mindcensor. Either they just don't really think that the ability matters anymore, or we just happen to be in a format where an effect like this just doesn't really seem to appeal to some people. Honestly, it deserves to be on this list, and it deserves to be on any list when it comes to Flash, mainly because that's just an insane thing you can do whenever you can just stop your opponent from getting to get the card that they want to get with their insanely powerful card. I mean, Demonic Tutor is one of the best cards in this entire format. You have a card here that basically shuts it down. I mean, it doesn't completely stop them from getting the card they want. I mean, there's a chance that the card they want is on the top of their deck. I mean, other than that, they're likely not going to get what they want. And this goes for the fetches as well. Just an insanely powerful card that it just seems like a lot of people forgot about. Number 6 is Notion Thief. One of those cards from the Return to Ravnica block, more specifically Dragon's Maze, that really doesn't see too much play, or it's not really an MVP like I think a lot of people might have predicted it to be. But in Dimir colors, you basically just want to do all the shady shit, and he fits in perfectly in decks like, say, if you want to play a Cast Storm deck, the Dissonant Mage, or if you want to play Yidris, or if you want to play any variant of Storm, really, Nekasar, the Mind Razor, anything where you want to draw a shit ton of cards. This card works out perfectly. If you throw in wheel effects, windfall effects, anything that can force your opponents to draw a ton of cards, you draw all of those cards. Of course, it has to be beyond the first card that they've drawn that turn, so that is the only downside, but really, when you're forcing everyone to draw a ton of cards, missing one card draw is really not that big of a deal. And this basically shuts down Consecrated Sphinxes, this shuts down Sylvan Libraries, this shuts down Rhystic Studies, it shuts down Phyrexian Arenas, it shuts down so many powerful cards in this format, and it's sort of like Aven Mind Sensor. I wouldn't say it's as underrated, but it's extremely powerful and useful for a very similar reason. It basically shuts down so many good cards in this format. Then number 5 is Venser Shaper Savant. Extremely powerful card, whether you realize it or not. And the main reason why is because it doesn't freaking counter the spell that you want to bounce back to your opponent's hand. And this is aside from the fact that you can just bounce back permanents and whatever you want back to their hand as well. Hey, if you hate land destruction, guess what? You can always bounce a land back to your opponent's hand with this card. And even better, if you throw this into something like, say, the new Anala deck, the one that can copy ETB triggers, yeah, you get to bounce 2 lands to your opponent's hand. I've done it before. Pretty hilarious. Venser Shaper Savant is super powerful for that reason alone. But yeah, going back to the whole counterspell thing, it doesn't technically counter a spell. It just returns it back to their hand. So if your opponent tries to play something like a Counterflux, oh wow, it can't be countered. Oh wow, I don't care. It's bouncing back to your hand. It's not countered. So you basically shut up cards like Sirach Dragonclaw, Supreme Verdict, things like that that can't be countered. This just answers it. And again, that's the whole purpose of Flash. The whole keyword, it's meant to offer a usefulness in options aside from just sorcery speed answers, which most creatures, most board wipes are not going to be as efficient in dealing with. Just a wonderful card. Number 4 is Teferi, Mage of Zhalfir. This guy does not see as much play as he should, and he is insanely powerful. Not only the fact that he has Flash himself, so he automatically qualifies to be on this list, but he gives other creatures you own that aren't in play, he gives them Flash. So you can Flash into play anything you want, as long as it's a creature, it's in your hand. That right there is a huge advantage. He himself also has Flash, so right there you go. Your opponent's end step, you can just Flash this into play, and just start flashing into play other creatures as well. Very solid card. Hey, and that's not even the best part about him. He also makes it to where your opponents can't cast spells outside of just sorcery speed. So they actually have to wait until their main phase, until they have to play spells. So if you're going up against other control decks, they can't do anything. They're helpless to stop you, especially if you want to combo out on your turn, as long as you have this guy. So not only is he going to make it super easy for you to go off with your combos, with your creatures, throw this into something like an Animar deck. He's super powerful in that deck, but he also shuts down your opponents as well. So he's super useful in that aspect. Yet again, proving why Flash is all about answers. It's all about shutting down what your opponents are trying to do. Then number 3, we have Shimmermere. Very basic, but yet again, a very similar reason as to why it's on this list compared to Teferi, Mage of Zhalfir. It's a little bit better to me because it works with artifacts. All your artifacts gain Flash. It also has Flash itself. However, he is significantly cheaper for just 3 mana. You don't have to invest that much mana into it, and you basically get a Vidalcan Orrery / Leyline of Anticipation for artifacts, which in artifact-based decks, the majority of what you're playing is, go figure, artifacts. So in those decks, this card is super powerful. Then number 2, we have Dictate of Erebos. I know I've said nothing but good things about this card, and I'm going to continue doing it. It is just a brilliant card. I honestly feel like it is better than Grave Pact. It's more flexible in the mana cost. You don't have to have 3 swamps or 3 lands that produce black mana. So even though it is 1 more mana expensive than Grave Pact, the fact that it has Flash makes it way better by comparison. You could Flash this into play in response to blockers. You could Flash this into play in response to a board wipe. You could Flash this into play whenever you want to sacrifice something and basically just force your opponents to take the same hit that you're taking, essentially. As far as whatever creature loss you have to deal with, make sure that they have to deal with that same type of creature loss. It's a great equalizer, and that's the main reason why Grave Pact effects exist. Sort of Black's best way of dealing with problem creatures is forcing your opponents to sacrifice them. And Dictate of Erebos is definitely one of my favorite cards in Black. It's also one of the best cards with Flash ever made, at least in my opinion it is. Then we move on to number 1, which is, of course, Snapcaster Mage. A lot of people might be wondering, well, how much better is this compared to Torrential Gearhulk? In Commander, it is definitely noticeable how much better it is. There are so many good sorceries in addition to good instants in this format. Like I said earlier, with cards like Demonic Tutor, those are sorceries. We have so many good board wipes in this format that are sorceries. We have so many good cards like Tooth and Nail are sorceries. We have just an insanely overwhelming amount of good sorceries in addition to instants. So yes, you have to pay that card's converted mana cost with the flashback, but what you get in terms of options, what you can actually do, it is definitely worth it compared to Torrential Gearhulk. Torrential Gearhulk is still a very good card and is likely going to be in a lot of the same decks that Snapcaster's in, but Snapcaster just gives you more options in terms of the cards that you can play from your graveyard. That is always going to take priority over just instants when you can also take sorceries back from your graveyard. So anyway guys, hope you enjoyed this top 10 list of the best cards in Commander with Flash. If you feel like something didn't make the list, please let me know in the comments section below. I definitely want to hear your guys' input. So anyway, you'll have a wonderful day. Void here, signing off.